Okay, we are recording. Joining me today, Josh. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. The most relaxed podcast guest I think I've ever seen. Are you literally just chilling in bed?
Well, I've got yes, in short, yes, that is what's happening. But I have a situation where my partner is, because of the train strikes, is working from home, and I didn't feel it was fair for her to be working because she's doing like what she'd call real work, whereas
Yeah,
we're just chatting about music. So,
yeah.
yeah, I said that she could have the living room and the office space. I don't know what you call it, but yeah. So I'm in bed, mate. Yeah.
Wonderful,
You
wonderful.
look you look far more organized than me.
Oh, do
And
you know
see
what?
and
That's just a little wonky board behind me. Like apart from that, what you can't see this side, absolute shit show, mate.
is
Like,
it?
yeah, absolute chaos. Um, well, look, let's jump straight in. And for track one, mate, I want to ask you to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
I'm gonna be by the Proclaimers.
I listened to it again this morning before this. I mean, it's pretty perfect as far as an intro goes. Tell me why you chose it.
Because it brings back loads of fond memories for me, and usually it involves being pissed somewhere in Scotland. Um, Especially like tea in the park or something like that, where like it's just I don't know, just gets silly when a festival like that's taking place. But it's just a great tune. And yeah, I don't know. It was the for some of the other songs in the other kind of questions I had to sort of like was umming and ahhing and digging deep, and this was the only one that like straight away I was like, there's nothing else that I even consider having a good intro in comparison to this. So it was just yeah, like a knee-jerk reaction. I thought I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna stay with it. Um, yeah, it's fun. It's a fun song as well. So I thought, it's usually that's usually a good way to start any sort of track listing with something a little bit more, a little bit more fun like that.
It's a call to arms as well, isn't it? It's a proper rebel rousing tune,
Yeah,
and you get the payoff when it gets to the chorus. Like it's monster, isn't it?
it's huge, and it's like I don't know. Again, like it's that thing of seeing thousands of people all just screaming this with pints in their hands. For me, that is music. That's live music. Is when it's just like total unison of a large group of people. Um, and yeah, it's a massive, massive chorus. Yeah, and I often enjoy getting stuck in on this one for sure.
Josh, I want to ask you about um, intros essentially, but when the band started, it would have been people would have got their music in much different ways to how they get their music now.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, a lot of emphasis from labels being focused on things like TikTok and obviously the influence that getting on Spotify playlists and such can really, shift records for bands.
Mm,
Um, and in them spaces, it's ferociously competitive
yeah.
where you're seeing so many bands and artists starting with a chorus and literally just hooking to try and grab them straight from the off. Tell me a little bit about, if at all, their considerations in your creative process.
Uh, I would be dishonest if I said that there hasn't been conversations which are about, the formats in which people will be consuming our music, and how that looks and feels and blah blah. I remember actually on our last record, Sucker Punch, our managers at the time were horrified that our opening track had about 50 seconds with no vocals at the beginning of it. And I think sometimes, look, I think there is nothing wrong with being aware of what the kind of current climate is in music, and there's nothing wrong with being aware of quote unquote trends or things that are working. I think, however, when it comes to songwriting, if you're finding yourself genuinely shaping your art based on that, then there's a big problem. And maybe that's maybe me romanticizing the process of making a song a bit too much. But so if you start a song with a chorus because that's serving the song,
Sure.
cool. If you're starting the song with a chorus as a trick because you think that's giving yourself the best chance for people to not turn you off so you can get that stream um, tallied up. I think that's a shame. I don't think, and I think it's all down to the individual. It's all down to how they feel, how intensely they feel about that sort of stuff. And I've played the game at times, and there's at times I've taken a seat on the bench and let other people, and TikTok is one that I've definitely wrestled with, as was the whole notion of, oh, radio song can't be longer than 2 minutes 30. I mean, how can you properly sometimes again if it serves a song, we've got a song called Underdog, which is 2 minutes 30, which we wrote in 2009, so that had nothing to do with DSPs or that sort of stuff. But just shaving time off a song or not setting it up properly for the sake of maybe or maybe not being played on the radio again, I think is a dangerous thing to do, because sometimes, like we're in this conversation, a fan's favorite part of a song is an intro or the middle eight or the 2 minute guitar solo. You're potentially you're potentially isolating fans and also isolating yourself from fans by going down that route. So I think it's a bit of a minefield for artists, but I think as long if it happens naturally and it's part of just it's just the outcome of that pursuit, then that's one thing. But I think if it's kind of more, it's kind of having too much time talked about and explored for those formats, I think that can be a bit dangerous.
Absolutely. Tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you.
It would be Hotel California by the Eagles.
Okay.
And I think it's because it's the first time I have vivid memories of. I used to live in Cyprus when I was growing up. So from about the age of like 4 till 7, I lived in Limassol. And I say it had an emotional impact because it was like me, my mum, my dad, and my sister all in the car driving to the beach after school. And it was like all year round was pretty much like that. And then also it would feel empty when my dad was away with work or, so it's the first song that I attached to either really profound happiness of a family unity and us all singing a song in the car together, or people being absent. And I remember being really sad about it. And that's the first time that a song had either made me really happy or really sad, but it was the same thing. So I think in that sense, it had quite a profound impact on me. And yeah, it's a classic, obviously, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Was home a musical place?
It really was. Neither of my parents played instruments, but music was kind of I would say like the focal point of like our family bonding, or any time family friends would come over or family. But I have so many memories of like mum and dad having, you know, 3 or 4 of their couples of their best mates coming over, and it was like music before they sat down for dinner, music whilst they were having dinner, and then the dancing music came on after dinner. And it was like me and my sister Alyssa were always part of that. We're always dancing around with them, and just kind of also like, I think the music that your parents grow you up on has such a kind of imprint on then the music you then pursue,
Absolutely.
whether rightly or wrongly. But like, so for me, it was like the Police, Eagles, Jethro Tull, Fleetwood Mac, Jimi Hendrix, um, you know, Phil Collins, just like just great music. Um, and then my dad would play me a lot of like Corsican singer-songwriter stuff, which was a little less enthusiastic about that. But yeah, just and what was interesting is my mum or my dad would always like then depict a story of why they were playing me that song. So it was never just like, oh, I'm playing you the song. It was always this thing which was always like a really colorful moment in their life or experience or something that was about them. So then I guess in my formative years, that kind of um, introduced me to the idea of a song having a place in your life, always moving forward because it brings you back to a particular moment and how important it is to have that attachment and that, I guess, that synergy between a song and a memory. Um, and so that's always been the way it's been ever since that. Ever since that kind of like early stages of my life. So yeah, I think a band like the Eagles was just kind of was involved in my childhood, whether I knew it or not. So I think that's the power of music.
Yeah, but that's also like fantastic parenting to just kind of attach something to every record and discuss that with you, and that that paints a picture. I think that's a really positive thing to sort of pass to your children. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you, man. And it's definitely something that like we were very communication in our family was always like, like if we had dinner, it wasn't on a weekday after school, it wasn't run to the table, eat your dinner and piss off within 15 minutes. It was like we're sitting at the table for an hour and a half.
Mm.
We're really like trying to understand what people were feeling and thinking about their day and what they'd learned, the good, the highlights, the low lights sort of thing. And that just I think has always been then such a contributing factor to me being aware of my emotions and therefore ultimately contributing to what I now do and have done for 18 years as my job essentially is telling stories or trying to paint pictures of my experiences and my my either turbulent moments or like really beautiful happy moments. And I think yeah, that combined with that idea of, and it'd be the same if like I would show my parents as I got older, like into my teenage years, and I was like playing them like not stuff that was top 40 or Capital FM, but it was like Linkin Park or Incubus or System of a Down and these sort of bands the first time, and then being like, Dad, I want you to take me to Linkin Park because you won't let me go otherwise. So can you be the one that let's go do that together? And like that sort of stuff. So music was always just such I don't know, it was just constantly woven into so many different aspects of like our family dynamic. Um, it's just always been, yeah, such a potent part of our family dynamic.
So, Josh, when did you move to the UK, or did you go somewhere else before you came back to the UK from
Oh,
Cyprus?
no, I was only in Cyprus from the ages of 4 to 7.
So you started school pretty much in the UK.
Yeah, pretty, yeah. Like year three yeah,
Yeah.
year two, year three was in the UK. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's stay in the formative years and let's talk school. Tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Josh.
Well, so I kind of earmarked two because
Okay.
one.
I'll let you have an honourable mention, mate. You're all right.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with the honourable mention of Out of Reach by Gabrielle
Yeah.
because there was a period in time where I was like, I think the ages of 8 till sort of like 12, where my dad would drive me to Saturday football every Saturday um, to train and then either play on a Sunday or we just go straight into match because at age 8 you don't really need to train. So anyway, like the radio was always on and Gabrielle just went on this, I guess, what you call just an unbelievable run of just like dominating the British charts for like 2 or 3 years. And I just remember um, Out of Reach was always seemed to be, it was a classic sort of like stick it on at like, you know, between 9 and 11 a.m. on a Saturday because everyone's adults probably getting up with a hangover, putting the radio on and having a coffee and a fry up. So yeah, I would hear a lot of Gabrielle. So it always brings me back to that memory of like me and my dad driving to football, PD United, him watching me play, driving back. I was picking up some breakfast stuff for my sister and my mum, and then going back and I'd have a shower. And by the time I was out, we're having breakfast together. And yeah, so Gabrielle was always there. But like, I remember like the first song that discovering a song together with my sister was Perfect 10, Beautiful South. And like, I think they were on Top of the Pops on the Friday night. So then on the Saturday morning, we walked down to it wasn't HMV, it was another record store that was in our high street. It might have even been Woolworths or something like that. And like we bought Perfect 10 on cassette and then just went home and listened to it all day. So it's like, yeah, it was like the thing I would look forward to for definitely like a couple of months when that was probably the period of time when me and her first got into buying records, if you like, singles. And we didn't have a CD player, we had a cassette player between us. So was buying Beautiful South and like it was one of those where like it was kind of strange because it wasn't like um childish. Like Beautiful South were like quite a sophisticated
Yeah,
outfit. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
yeah, you had like this 8-year old and this 11-year old or 7 and 10-year-old like sitting in their living room listening to it and dancing around like a bit straight. It wasn't quite Blue or like some of the other stuff that might got played like the school disco. So yeah, it was I don't
it's
know, old souls maybe. I don't know.
what an intro Perfect Ten's got.
Yeah,
Straight in,
yeah,
like so good. And I mean, you talk about the tear that Gabrielle went on. Then I think uh, Perfect Ten had just dropped after their greatest hits, Carry On Up the Charts, which at one point, I'm sure the stats was 1 in 3 households in the UK owned the Best of the Beautiful South. That's pretty insane, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, that's wild because again, like I probably grew up in a period of time where the number ones each week were like 300,000 albums. Do you know what I mean? And like, that's why now if like somebody gets anything up north of 50,000 is like a fucking huge first
Yeah,
week.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? And I mean, we've had a number one with 32 and another one with like 14. So it's like now, yeah, they're probably again, they were 7 years apart. So it shows even then how much that changed in 7 years. It was almost half of what would have got you number one could now do that now. So I mean, yeah, they must have just been shifting units, like millions and millions of units a
yeah.
month. Just a completely different time. That's always my favorite. I remember I'll never forget this conversation I had with one of our first like A&Rs. My first A&R experience at EMI was and Virgin was this guy saying to me, "Oh mate, if you'd been a band 10 years ago, you'd all have mansions already." And I was like, "Fucking,
Cheers,
what
mate.
good is that? What good is that now?" In 2009, 2010, you're saying if we just popped up in the late 90s or early 2000s, we'd be swimming in it. It was sort of like, yeah, because just record sales, even then, were just starting to like, as I said, there'd be a handful of releases a year, which would really be impressive numbers.
Yeah.
Um,
Cheers for the motivational speech, Gov. Lovely.
Cheers,
Yeah.
man. Love that.
All right, look, I mean, I could also talk about how beautiful Gabrielle's voice is, which she seems to have just kind of disappeared now. It seems a shame because, like you say, she went on a tear, but her voice, there's something really, really beautiful about it. Not just that track. The track is, give me just a little more time, pure sort of stack soul sound to it. And her voice just it breaks me in half, mate. But
Yeah.
let's talk school. Did you enjoy school? And also, you mentioned Woolies and moving to the UK. Where was school?
So I grew up in Weybridge, Surrey. It's kind of like just suburbia, I guess. Like I mean, we used to when I was a teenager, you could be in Waterloo within like 20 minutes. So it was kind of southwest London, I suppose. Um, but really like, sort of probably about 20 minutes from Kingston, Guildford, stuff like that. So there were some bigger towns, if you like, near us, but Weybridge has got absolutely nothing about it really, and just very leafy, lots of trees. But like school was fine, man. But I was like, you know, primary school is a piece of piss because you know everyone's just floating about, really, aren't they? Secondary school, you're sort of there's so many things you're discovering for the first time, so it's like exciting but equally as confusing in equal measure. Um, and I think sort of in the year 10, year 11, so sort of age sort of 14, 15, 16 was challenging because it was just in that period where like you were defined actually, you know, in at least in my school, you were defined on the music you listened to and what you wore. So I would have been what people would have referred to as a metler or a grebo at school. Um, and like the chavs and the pikeys weren't great. But also, I mean, it was Surrey. Like it's nowhere near as bad as what it could have been. Do you know what I mean? Like I could have been in a school in other parts of the country where you would have really gone through it. So I'm not going to complain too much. But it was just even interesting then how like you know starting your first bands and like you there'd be like the band dudes in the corner at lunchtime and then you'd be the football lads. But I was kind of both. So I was the only person out of my friendship group that was in bands or like metal or guitar music that then would then go and play football with everybody. But there was that kind of period between sort of like, sorry, 13 and 15, where it was all very much like, you're a metaler, you're different, you're getting a slap, versus then when you got to like the last 2 years, like GCSE years, everyone was sort of like just growing up that little bit more where they realized how juvenile and stupid that all was.
Yeah.
Everyone just became mates, everybody, unless you're, you know, not a nice person. So, but I was, you know, I was very much especially my last year, I got into truancy a little bit because I was like, especially on a Friday, if there's a gig, it was all about, you know, bailing on school, getting a couple of cans in the park or around somebody's front room, getting ready to go to the gig, the local gig, firing up on the train or firing up down to London. It was either like Guildford, Woking, Reading, or go up to London, just being like, you know, you'd be pissed off like half a bottle of White Lightning. So it was a good time. Um, but yeah, so that was my last year at school. I mean, I got suspended, and they basically the school told me at one point that I wasn't going to be allowed to do my GCSEs, and I think that freaked my mum out. So I kind of knuckled down for just that last 6 months. But I was so lazy at school, man. Like I just saw all of it so pointless. Like I just didn't see the value in doing chemistry or like, do you know what I mean? Just things that like didn't speak to me. So I was kind of, I
Did you
was
know
never,
what you wanted to be?
yeah, I knew at like 14 that like I wanted to be playing music. So I loved music. Anything creative, anything that was an extension of my creativity or being able to put my stamp on something. So that could have been music, art, um, woodwork, even PE, you know, like something where it's like, oh, this is me in this space versus like, you know, practical stuff, maths. I loved like, for example, I loved English literature. Like you know, anything to do with words, I found fascinating. Anything to do with symbols or maths, I was like, this is just not me at all.
Yeah.
And I thought I found history really, really interesting. So I loved learning about why things were the way they were now based on how we got there. Um, but I think school, I don't know if the kind of like I don't know if like the infrastructure of school is ever going to change, but like there are some kids that find themselves lost in that system because the way, and I worry sometimes, are we suppressing inadvertently people's real talent by,
Hugely, hugely.
you know, and I think me and my partner have spoken about, you know, as and when we have children, like, do we homeschool them or do we are we more like a nomad family where we kind of like live in different parts of the world and teach them more about life? I mean, like, you know, I pay my accountant, you know, more money than that sometimes makes me feel comfortable. And I'm like, you know, it's wouldn't it have been good to have been taught how to really understand doing your taxes or like, how to be an electrician at school, even at a young age, like been learning how to like change a light bulb, change a fuse, just things that actually hold currency, I think, in everyday
Life
life.
skills. Yeah,
Life skills,
absolutely.
yeah. But
Absolutely.
so yeah, I think I didn't deal too well with the notion that learning stuff that I knew I couldn't really implement into Josh Franceschi, even as a teenager. I just didn't. I had no interest, so I was quite happy to be out of school. And then, oddly enough, I was only in college for a year, and then the band took off. So I left college at 17. So, but then weirdly, I did really academic stuff at college because I had the band as like a vehicle already on the side to like I was going off and gigging, but then I was doing like politics, business studies, and film studies. So I mean, film studies isn't really that academic, it's just watching City God and shit. But like, the business studies, and, like the politics side stuff was I found fascinating.
Yeah.
And maybe yeah, played a role in all that stuff.
Was you confident at that age?
What in college?
Yeah. At the point where, like, you'd left school and like you said, you had this sort of band at the time as a bit of a sort of side hustle alongside your studies, and where was you like at that point with confidence? Because you've obviously gone on to play on stages in front of thousands of people that most people would just think, I don't know, anyone could ever do that. And and you're up front as well. You're the center of attention, like that.
Mm.
That involves a level of confidence I think a lot of people haven't got. Tell me about where you was at with confidence in them sort of formative years.
Um, Truthfully, came in waves. I think it came in little fleeting visits. But I mean, like it was weird. Like I was meant to be. I'll never forget the Easter before our GCSEs. I was turning around to my dad, being like, "Dad, we got a gig on Saturday, and it's sold out because I've sold all the tickets to my mates at my secondary school." I was like, "I'm gonna make 400-500 quid from this. Like, I have to go and do it. I can't, so 100 quid each or 8 quid each, which when you're 15,
Yeah.
is decent wage. It's better than working at a supermarket, whatever." Um, so my dad would do this thing where he'd take my mum out for a meal, so I could run down to the local like youthy, play a gig, run home, and pretend I'd been revising whilst they'd been out. But in terms of confidence, I had the confidence to do that and understood like how that all worked. But then would spend 80% of the show with my back to the audience or like side on. And so I think it was only really when I left college. So, but I would still only been 17 when there was a year where we got a manager and he just said, because my college were very much the thing of like, well, they let me leave for a year and I could come back and still have my place. And so he was like, the only way that you guys are going to figure it out and figure out if you're any good at any of this is just by being on the road. And so he literally just had us on tour after tour after tour. And I think it was only really through doing that that the confidence grew because it had to. You can't stand in front of a room of like 300 people with your back to them. Especially if you want to try and make a career out of it, you've got to try and win them over and you've got half an hour to do it. So just one of those things that baptism of fire and just kind of trial and error relentlessly for years, I think kind of built it. But there wasn't really a correlation between being like having any layer of confidence at school or in the band and then bouncing off one another. That unfortunately didn't really happen for me.
Yeah. Tell me the first record you remember buying.
The first record I remember buying, and I would argue was a Bible for me at that point, was Make Yourself by Incubus. Um, and I bought it from there's a record store in Kingston called Banquet Records.
Shout out Banquet
And
Records, mate.
shout out Banquet Records, John Tolley and all the crew. They've been so uh, they've been so integral to pretty much every album release we've ever had. everything's gone through them. It's been brilliant. Being like a local band and working with probably, I think in the country, that's probably the biggest kind of go-to record store in terms of their outstore capability. And you know, there's not an artist they haven't had come through Kingston because of Banquet. So it's something that, yeah, they should all be very, John in particular should be very proud of putting together. But yeah, and they were great. Like, you know, you'd go into a store like Banquet and like I think I was in my Linkin Park phase and sort of my system of my new metal phase, and they always had this thing on like the tags of the albums for fans of, and I remember just picking up Incubus. It said like for fans of Linkin Park, and I guess the only thing I can think now is because there was DJs in both bands, right? Or desk scratchers or whatever you want to call them, and like I'm just going into the corner. They'd let you listen to the album before you bought it, so you could like open it all up, put it in a CD player, put some headphones on. And I think it's Privilege is track one on Make Yourself. I think it is. But I remember getting to like The Warmth and like Make Yourself and Pardon Me and Drive.
Oh, pardon me. When that chorus drops, man.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And I remember just like, just this, I literally sat and listened to that record from start to finish, just standing up with my jaw on the floor, being like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is
Yeah.
this? And then just turning around to John and the stuff, I was like, what else like this do you have? And they were like, okay, well, if you like that, you're probably going to like their record Science. They've just put out a new record called Morning View. So I actually picked up pretty much all of Incubus's back catalogue. And then like, I think off the back of that, it was like Finch, What It Is to Burn. And then he was like, if you like this, come back in a few weeks because I've got a shipment of like this record label called Drive Through Records, which will be basically all the bands that this band's record label is. And it was just like that. Like, so it's like I found like bands like Incubus and Finch, and like before I found like bands like Blink 182. Do you know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
strange because I was just kind of
Most
like,
people would have done it the other way around, right?
yeah, totally. And like, I mean, I didn't really even get into Blink until I think I got into them on self-titled and I went backwards.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, then it was like Dookie and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and like all these other records. And I was like, fuck it, I've been sleeping on this. And like, you know, but then there's still to this day, there's bands like The Offspring and Green Day that I've just never really listened to.
Yeah.
I've heard Green Day on the radio, I've seen them at festivals, but it was weird. There was like another sector of bands, even like bands like El Nino, like I was listening to more than I was like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like a Green Day basket case. So strange. So I was a metaler without being a metaler, if that
But I
makes
guess you know, with bands like Green Day and Offspring, you can. It's so easy to get overexposed to music like that, isn't it? And if you've got a tastemaker at Banquet feeding you stuff like Finch and stuff that's sort of floating a little bit underneath the radar somewhat, that's way more exciting and interesting as well, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think like so having bought that having bought Make Yourself and then being kind of like fed all this different stuff, you then discovered that like I was part of like what felt like a secret, almost like a secret society, especially with like the American emo pop punk MySpace thing. I mean, MySpace, to be fair, was only just coming into inception and sort of like my late, like my sort of late school years, my secondary school years. But like, you know, you'd go to a gig at the Underworld to watch Hidden Plainview, and there'd be like 300 people there, and everybody that was there, you were like, they're the only people in the whole of London that know about this band. It was the way that I thought of it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, um, and then like at the same time, I remember like going and watching Finch at the London Astoria, and like I think Million Dead supported them. So then I became a fan like Million Dead and like Frank Turner, or like going and watching like the early November starting line at Anne Boleyn at Mean Fiddler, and again being at the Mean Fiddler and thinking we're the only people in the world right now that matter because we're watching the three best bands in the world, in our opinion, in the set on the same bill. And it was just really like it was just a really cool, not cool as in like cool, but it was like it felt like a cool thing to be part of. Like it just felt like this really like underground scene because it wasn't top 40. They weren't even these bands weren't even being put on the cover of Kerrang. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
was, Newfound Glory maybe, but like bands like Finch weren't on the cover of Kerrang, but were selling out 2 nights at Astoria. So it was like you
yeah.
just felt like you're part of this like really like secret society. It was dope.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shout out Glassjaw as well, because they were floating underneath that radar at that
Oh
point
mate,
as well.
last year I remember if that was in the same sitting because I picked up Worship and Tribute the same day, I think, that I got Make Yourself, and I was just like, what is this? What is this? Like, just completely over the top. And then they sort of like opened the door to bands like Lex on Fire, The Bled, like some of that other stuff. And it's just like, yeah, it's just wild. Like, so as other people have been brought up on MTV and Kerrang TV, which is cool. I didn't have Sky, so I was brought up on like whatever record was in Bank Record, which said for fans of, and if I was already a fan of that band, I just bought it.
Yeah,
And I found so many great bands like North Star. That's how I discovered Taking Back Sunday. Therefore, I discovered all the bands on Victory Records. And then came Fueled by Ramen, and all the bands on that. So it's just
yeah.
like, yeah, it was a great time.
Lovely. Let's go clubbing. Tell me the song that soundtracked your years in Clubland, mate.
Club man. So I guess like I used to go out with a girl in St. Albans, and there was because I didn't really go clubbing unless I was staying at hers on the weekend, and I got roped into going to it basically. Um,
Are we
and it,
talking like kind of commercial high street clubbing?
yeah,
Not not dirty rock bar, like
I'm talking like vodka revs. I'm talking
right. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
um like, and again like we would do actually. In fairness, when we made our first proper record, we were living in Reading. Um, so this would have been like 2008, 2009. And it was the first time like our mates had gone off to uni. So we had 3 flats between us in Reading town centre, um, right round the corner from a pub called the Turk's Head. So we used to go and have a couple of pints in the Turk's Head. We'd walk down to Reading High Street, go to the Purple Turtle. We then go to this place which is called, like, I want to say, I can't remember what it's called now, but it was this club in Reading. It was the only like rock club, and it was ish. They had a a rock room, a metal room, and then like a top 40 room. But that was only open on Mondays and Tuesdays. Then the other clubs were basically like Vodka Revs or what was the place in Kingston called? Hippodrome, stuff like that. And I wasn't really like a clubber because like we were on tour so much. But I remember it was like Change the Way You Kiss Me, by example, was always on and in the clubs. And I kind of like just it brings back memories like being back home or when I was set my girlfriends and like going to their club nights in Hertfordshire, and, like just WKD nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Like just shit drinks.
If they ever made a compilation album of that era of dance music, it should be called WKD Nonsense, mate. That's the
Mate,
name of the record.
isn't it? Like it was sort of shit,
Mm.
right? But it
Yeah,
was
100%.
but also brilliant in the same time. Like, I don't know. And it was just kind of like, because it just wasn't my thing, I didn't listen to that kind of music at all unless I was in that environment.
Mm.
So it kind of just became like a bit of a laugh. Like,
Yeah,
I'd look at those nights as like, oh, yeah, we're going down there. Some of us might be on the pool, whatever. We'll have a couple of drinks and, we'll get there for about 10, 11 o'clock. We'll bail by 1, 2, and that's it. It was never like, it wasn't like a rave or anything like that. But
yeah,
maybe it's a bit later on in life. But yeah, so probably example and friends like example, Tiny Tempo, all that sort of stuff.
yeah. All right, I'm going to take you home. Favorite song from an artist from your home county?
Oh, you know what? I've misread this
It's
question.
fine, man. When I thought, you know
I
what,
said country.
that's not a Geordie accent I'm hearing. And
Well,
don't honestly, Josh, you will be. I think this is episode 441, and I reckon you're probably about the 400th and 10th person that's gone. Oh fuck, county. I thought it was country. So don't worry, mate. You're one of hundreds.
all right. Well, okay. I'll think my feet here. Then I've got the only other bloke that I know sort of lived in Surrey was Simply Red. I'm pretty sure of it. What's his name? Mick Hucknall. Is that
Hmm.
Simply Red?
I thought he was Mancunian.
Yeah, but he lived in Surrey when I grew up.
Oh,
So
really?
he was from my home county, but he's
Right.
not from there. I mean, who from? I wouldn't even tell you a artist. I'm sorry at all.
Reading. Who you got in Reading? You had Does It Offend You? Yeah, they're from Reading. Uh,
Oh, do you know I could go? I could go hard fight because they're from Staines.
they were. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember any of the names of their songs. You might be able to help me out. Have a little.
Living for the Weekend, Hard to Beat. Uh,
I'll know it when I see it. Hard fight. They're making a comeback now, aren't
I
they?
did see that. I did see that. They had
They're
some.
playing the forum.
They blew right up and then just seemed to just completely disappear. Cash Machine, I think was their first one. Tied Up Too Tight. That was the
Yeah,
best one they've done.
yeah. Was cool. I mean, any one of them. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, look. Do you know what? Let's go
Was-
country anyway because you put Sam Fender and I mean he's doing all right, isn't he?
Yes, mate. I think he's. I think he's probably one of the most interesting artists that we've had for as long as I've been in the music industry. So almost 20 years. He's the one that has been like, as a solo artist as well. I know he has a great group of friends and a great band behind him. But he's almost at a time when everybody was kind of trying to adhere to song structures for radio and TikTok and like was trying to tap into whatever was on trend. He's the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah.
You know, like 17 going under. What is that song structure?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what is the chorus? I know what the hooks are in the chorus
Yeah.
in the song, but it's not a traditional ABAB sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I just think he's unapologetically himself. I think that's why the Northeast have as claimed him as their son, if you
Yeah.
like. 2 nights at St James's Park is mind-boggling, but totally justifiable, I think. Um, and yeah, I think he's just a very earnest songwriter and very. You can tell he's had a colourful upbringing
Yeah.
where he's from in North Shields and like but he's just a story. It's old school. He's telling stories.
Mm.
He's not looking necessarily for a tagline, which people hear on the radio once and go, "Oh yeah, that's that throwaway comment,"
Yeah.
all that. And there's just it got for me. It just instills again that concept of write something beautifully, painfully honest, and the people will come.
Yeah.
Be a storyteller.
Absolutely.
Don't try and be a shapeshifter and don't look at the charts. Don't look at how to get on the big playlist and all this sort of stuff, which I do understand the currency it holds. I do understand the importance of it, but he's done it unashamedly himself and the way he wants to do it. And it's all about the songs.
Yeah.
And I think it's fucking quality. So yeah, he's definitely
Before,
my people's champion for sure.
before we get on to the last track, I asked you about confidence earlier, and you've mentioned several times how long you've been doing the band. To maintain success in such a tough industry is not easy. Certainly at the sort of level of success that your band's had. Confidence aside, tell me about how driven you are.
I think so it there's been different kind of like injections of why along the way to be driven. But the catalyst at the beginning was to because what we touched upon earlier, like not feeling like I felt comfortable in the environment of that structured education,
Yeah.
school, college, university. So I was like, I'm good at this, and this is a way out of not having to do that. And then as I mean, it didn't take long for us to, I think we headlined the Astoria when I was 18. So it was like it didn't take long for us to find our feet and really get moving. Um, but you
That's a
have to,
moment. That's a moment, right?
yeah, I think we're one of, it's only us, the Arctic Monkeys and the Darkness that have sold out these stories an unsigned band. So we had lots of like victories along the way, which then just continued to act as a reason to be like, well, we've done this, we've got so I mean our target by the age of 20 was Wembley Arena, which is like ridiculous because we'd already done Brixton. So we're like, well, what is it now? It's got to be Wembley. How do we get there? I think basically there's luck, obviously, there's talent, but if you don't work hard or if you're not driven, if you don't get out of bed every day with something, it doesn't matter how big or how small the intention is or the purpose is, without that in music, you will not make it. It has to become your life, and you have to be measured, I think. And I mean that in the sense of you can't believe your own hype. You do that, you're fucking finished before you know it. And you also can't be your violin player when something's going bad. You have to be, just there's a great Robert De Niro thing that I've seen popping around all over the internet for the last few years, but it's just like just take it all, just this too will pass, just calm down, like good and bad. And I think, I've had that in me at all times, and I think especially during probably at the biggest our band's been, or like when the highest up trajectory was happening at a rampant rate, was when my dad was suffering the most with his profession and was unemployed and was really struggling. And so we set up a merch company together. He did the band's merch. We then set up a clothing company together for me, which he basically ran and did. And it was something that was on my mind was you might have what you think is everything right now, but you can quickly have nothing. So that's always been a driving force. And I've not come from money, although I grew up in, some people would say on paper, like Surrey is a very well-to-do area and an affluent area. There's definitely parts of that for sure. But like in the area, there's affluence and there's poverty. And we were neither one. We were sort of like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, one holiday a year, but saved up for it sort of vibe.
Yeah.
So I know what it's like to like, I've never been poor, but I've never been rich really until I've earned, I've had a job since I was 14, 15. So like I understand the correlation between working really fucking hard and being successful,
Yeah.
and nobody giving me like, no one's ever opened the door for Unit 6. We've smashed it down.
Yeah.
So I guess there's been moments where, an understanding has happened where I'll never forget marching up to the MD of EMI being like, you're blocking our music at the moment. You don't want us. We don't need to be here. Pick Emily Sandé over us. That's fine. Just let us go from your label. Rip up the contract. Let us go. It was me that did that at 21, not our management, not some lawyer. It was me who went up to him at the Christmas party and got him to agree, and he ripped up the contract a week later. So it's like, I've just always believed that if, like, you have to treat people well, but you also have to not be a sucker. You have to
Yeah.
work your ass off. And like, no is not an answer. I don't mean that in every aspect. I mean that when it comes to work, like someone slamming a door in your face is just presenting you with a new way of breaking down a door. What are you going to use this time? The crowbar, the foot? Do you know what I mean? Like you got to get
Yeah.
through it. So yeah, there's always been an immense sense of drive and purpose in this band for sure.
Wonderful. There's a lyric from my pal Scroobius Pip, and it's you see a mousetrap, I see free cheese and a fucking challenge. And I love that. And I just think that sums up the music industry for me. All right. Okay. Last track. This is when you get to be a tastemaker, mate. A song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear.
Sure. Well, I've gone with I Should Take I Should Take Better Care by Cody Frost. Cody's an artist that stumbled across, I say stumbled across, I was directed by my friend Matt Hughes when I was asking people online who I should check out as potential features, because I wanted to give a platform to some newer artists on our record. He showed me her. I messaged her that day on Twitter, being like, I think your voice is stunning, haunting, just vulnerable, just perfect for this and perfect for the song we have. And she was stoked because I think she's a massive Unit 6 fan. So she was all over it and she jumped on it and she sounds incredible on our song that we have coming out in January on the record. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer for me, for her to be the choice for sure.
I'd not heard her voice before, and obviously doing prep on this, I listened. It's marvelous, man. It's something special, that voice. We make it really easy for listeners of podcasts to go and explore it because we put together a Spotify playlist, Josh, of all the tracks that we've spoken about today. You mentioned new music in January. What's happening?
Yeah. New album comes out January 27th. And then we start our UK tour that night, and it ends at Alexandra Palace in London on February 11th. So it's going to be a good one. And then I've got to be best man at some wedding. I say some wedding, my best mate's wedding, a week later, and then we start our European tour. So it's all kind of happening. But yeah, lots of great stuff going on.
Wonderful. Josh, if people want to keep up to speed with everything that's happening, where's the best place?
All the usuals, mate, to be honest with you. Social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Amazon, Deezer, you name it, we're there somewhere abouts. Just usually Unit6, type it into that and you'll find it.
Wonderful. Josh, it's been really nice chatting, man. Thank you so much for your time, buddy.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for your time and thank you for having me.
I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.
All right, mate.